Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NICHOLASMCGIRR.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 21. This week we're going to be discussing White Point Gardens. But first, let's thank all the listeners who went over to Buy Me a Coffee over the past 2 weeks and listened to the exclusive interview with Brian McFarlane where we discussed Byron Price's The Secret. For only $1, you can drop $1 in a coffee pot and you can listen to episode 19 and all future episodes for Byron Price's The Secret research that we're doing right here in Charleston. So we're getting pretty busy with stories in the cemetery. I've been given tours through downtown, of course, with it being a ghost hunting experience, and I was getting interviewed and mentioned in our local paper, the Post and Courier, for my tour. Well, with that being said, let's be upfront about what this article is actually about. Right now, there's a debacle in Charleston over licensed tour guides versus unlicensed tour guides. I'll be upfront at this point, and I'm an unlicensed tour guide, folks. To give ghost hunting experiences in Charleston, I know the legends, the lore, the stories, all behind the locations of my tour, and I've studied the tour guide licensing book, but I use it as a reference, and I have not actually taken the test. This is a story that the Post and Courier has been following over the past year, and with me being kind of a pioneer in this respect, they wanted to chat with me. So, I am quoted. You can see some pictures there. Of course, I will post the link in the show notes, so if you want to check out that article over the licensing debate here in Charleston, and actually see Stories in a Cemetery in action, because there are some pictures up there. I will definitely post that in the show notes. So I wanted to say thank you to Jamie for his review of my ghost hunting tour. Jamie says, Nick was able to share many stories that most of the regular tours in Charleston don't include. We also got to use the tools of the trade, which made it exciting for my daughter and I. Jamie, thanks so much for your review. That was a 5-star review. We are on several websites right now, including TripAdvisor, Expedia, Groupon. I cannot remember which website this came from because all reviews so far have been 5 stars. Jamie was one of my recent tours, so just wanted to say thank you to Jamie. As far as merch goes, guys, we are getting closer to making the final decisions on the merchandise with the t-shirts, making sure like we are going to have enough of a variety so that way it's not just one shirt to choose from. So of course, as we get closer, I will make sure I will post the links and be shouting from the rooftops when that is available. And last but not least, in the housekeeping notes, please make sure to leave a rating on your favorite podcatcher. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, CastBox, and my host Anchor all accept reviews and or comments. So if you leave me a voicemail on Anchor, I will feature it right here at the beginning of one of my episodes during the housekeeping notes. So, guys, I wanted to keep the housekeeping notes short, as this week has been kind of a debacle in itself. We actually had some pipes burst in one of our bedrooms, and I am recording this before the maintenance team comes to come and rip apart the walls of one of the bedrooms in my house so we can not have any water coming through the walls. It's kind of creepy. Today, guys, we're actually going to talk about White Point Gardens. So, and you can argue with me if it's gardens, plural, or White Point Garden. Every piece of research I found on a place had it listed differently. And I believe Google Maps even has it as White Point Garden, singular. So, which would make more sense, but for this, we're not trying to be politically correct, because we are more focused on what's on the grounds, what's haunting it, and is there any evidence? So first of all, what's been drawing me to this location and wanting to go back there, because I've been there several times. Of course, I went there to visit. It's beautiful and gorgeous and stunning, all the same adjectives I use of many places of Charleston, but until you're actually there, feeling the cool breeze off the water and just enjoying the serenity that's there, you'll have to see it for yourself. It is right on the tip of downtown Charleston, on the water. So again, but there's also a lot of memorials there. First one I'll mention, and I'll just mention a few of these, just for the sake of what's actually on the grounds. First one I'll mention is that of the USS Amberjack, and that pays tribute to the 374 officers, 3,131 men, aboard the 52 named submarines on the memorial from the U.S. Navy. These submarines aided the success of World War II. The next memorial was erected in 1954. This memorial pays tribute to those who passed away on the USS Hobson. All 176 men have a tile below the memorial with their home state. The third one that I'll mention, and of course there's many more, and when you visit, or if you've already been there, you know I'm only mentioning a few, is that of William Gilmore Simms, Charleston native author known as the Antebellum South's leading man of letters, and he actually has a bust on top of the memorial. Now, I will tell you what has led me there was, obviously, I've been studying the Byron Preiss, The Secret for Charleston, over the past few months, and if you are a follower of this particular book and the research that goes on with it, you'll realize that White Point Garden is the prime location where people think that Byron has buried the secret cask. With the research that's been done for verse 6, it is also claimed that one of the memorials is sitting on top of where one of the casks would have been buried and therefore has been destroyed. And to me, it was almost pointless to start diving into this, especially with the cask being destroyed and I have no access to it, that I decided I was going to go with verse 5 after reading James Wachowski's research and how different of a path that he took. Now, I tried to match up verse 5 with things that were in White Point Garden, of course using Google Maps and research and computer and technology and all of that, and nothing seemed to match up. So that's where I stay away from White Point Garden when it comes to Byron Preiss's The Secret. So very interesting fact right there, the fact that I'm not using White Point Garden as my burial site in my research. The grounds there are, again, stunning. It's definitely cooler there. We were actually in another part of downtown earlier that day, and we were actually pretty warm. Even for January, it was pretty warm. And once we got down to the garden, we noticed how much cooler it was. And that's going to add to the effect of what's actually being haunted here. And, you know, there's an old phone booth. The funny thing is I have a picture of that phone booth on my blog listed as not a spirit box, because it does look like a box with just a phone inside of it. So super cool there. Again, gorgeous pictures, and it's a great place for photographers to go, because, I mean, even with other visitors on the grounds, it's easy to get pictures, beautiful pictures, without anybody in the background. And I mean, you can probably even get away with without any vehicles in the background if you're looking just nature. So, guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. And we're back. Thanks so much, guys, for allowing me to put sponsors in the middle of the show. It definitely moves things along. So we were getting ready to talk about the actual haunting and the stories that come out of White Point Gardens. So the haunting story comes from that of Stede Bonnet and his men. Bonnet, known as the Gentleman Pirate, that was his nickname, so you can actually Google that, and you will get all of the full history there. But he was a family man and a wealthy landowner that kind of went rogue in 1717. He purchased a ship. He named it the Revenge, as most ships were named the Revenge in that very piratey type age. He recruited anywhere from 50 to 70 men, depending on which article you read, and then he set sail. He had, specific intentions. Of course, depending on which articles you read, those intentions were always varied. His notion of becoming a pirate is still unknown, since he left his wife and children behind to set forth a career of crime and piracy. Some articles state that he borrowed a sum of money worth about $400,000 in today's currency, and he was bound to pay it back. but others say he simply just went crazy and mad and had a mental breakdown and therefore became a pirate. Now, the weird thing about Stede Bonnet was that he stood out among his men because he was very well dressed, his face was shaven, he was a very clean pirate, so that could also have been part of the reason why he was given the name the Gentleman Pirate. But I will tell you that Bonnet did meet Edward Blackbeard Thatch, or Teach, depending on which tour guide you're talking to. He became friends with Blackbeard, and Blackbeard didn't really see him as, a very good pirate. So they just kind of went their separate ways, and they went back and forth with, trying to steal each other's ship and this, that, and the other. And you can, again, get all of these very great details from, I believe I found it on the Smithsonian website. There's a link in the show notes and on the blog. But it is said that Bonnet, after a while, went after Blackbeard, but he was caught by Colonel William Rhett in Cape Fear, and Rhett was set out from Charleston to go find him. Bonnet's men, they forfeited themselves, and they were hung from the numerous trees there in White Point Garden. Now, if you take a look at the pictures that I posted of White Point Garden, there are trees everywhere, so you can only imagine how many bodies were actually hung, from these trees. Several days later, Judge Nicholas Trott actually condemned Bonnet to hang with them as well, and those bodies were hanging from these trees for days as kind of a warning for other pirates of what happens to pirates when you come to Charleston. After they were cut down from the trees, they were actually buried in a nearby marsh along the water. Again, you can hear this story on any website that even mentions pirates, Blackbeard, anything dealing with Charleston pirates. Stede Bonnet will actually come up just about every single time. So if you're taking a tour through downtown Charleston and you're on a ghost tour, you're going to hear this story, and it's a great tale. Now, the haunting that comes along with this in White Point Garden, because the men were hung there, it is said that you can see their faces in the trees and hear their screams at night. So that's where my investigation comes in, where I was there in the middle of the afternoon during daylight hours. It was a cloudy day, but it was still during the daylight hours, and this could be where I'm wrong, that I actually have to be there at night to actually do this investigation. But my argument, even with Brian, when we're out looking for new locations that are allegedly haunted, is that ghosts don't care what time of day it is, whether it's nighttime, daytime, morning. They don't care. It might be a seasonal thing, but usually the time of day does not have an influence on the equipment, where it's only going to happen or have paranormal activity come through as data on my gadgets and devices only at a specific time of day, unless, of course, that's the legend. But with that being said, it's the middle of the afternoon. I have my EMF detector out, my K2, the digital spirit box is running, and I also have the analog spirit box running. During my hour to hour and a half walk around the garden, dead silence on all three accounts. The EMF didn't even try to give me any kind of signal. So you've seen pictures of my K2. It's on my blog. It goes from green all the way up to red with different variations of yellow, orange, and other green. There wasn't any kind of movement from the K2 EMF detector at all. I even tried a less sensitive EMF detector on my phone as an app. I've been kind of playing around with different EMF detectors just as an extra tool to have when I'm out with my walking groups. There was no movement whatsoever. There was no detection of EMF anywhere on the grounds. And I won't say that I covered all 5+ acres of the ground, but I will tell you that I walked a pretty good bit of it over that hour and a half. Of course, it wasn't a sprint. It's not like I'm going to run around with an EMF detector and wait for something to give me a signal. It's just a walk around. And with the spirit box in my other hand, there was absolutely nothing that came through. So let's talk about the app for a second. The app, normally, as you know, will give me words right in the middle of the screen with any type of detection, and it is meant to be a game and a hoax. As you guys know, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that it's not always a very accurate tool. I kind of have to weed through the noise to find the right words that actually match up to the location that I'm at. Not one word came through in the time frame that I was at the garden. Now, I could be sitting at home with this app running on a table in my desk, wherever, and it'll give me a word every 3 to 5, maybe 8 minutes. Just a random word. And that's kind of how the game works, is it's meant to, for you to watch it and wait for words to come through. The funny thing about this is that nothing came through in over an hour time. So the dead silence could be exactly that, or the fact that something else was influencing it to the point where nothing came through at all. So take that for what it's worth. The analogs, the manual spirit box, I had it running as well and could not make out anything through the static at all. So again, complete silence at White Point Garden. And we could put this to the point that I was there during the daytime, and that I should go back at night and see what happens there to see if I actually see faces and maybe capture some pictures of these faces in the trees. But my conclusion at this point is that White Point Garden is not actually haunted, but I am a little disturbed at the fact that the app Spirit Box did not give me anything. So it does kind of lead me to want to go back, but at this point, it's a great story. Again, part of the reason why you listen to this podcast is so that you can hear a ghost story. Part of the reason you take tours downtown on a ghost walk is so that you can hear ghost stories. But I think with the evidence that is lacking at this point, so I haven't found any pictures that anybody was able to take of pirate faces in the trees, nor have I heard any audible pieces that had screams in them from White Point Garden. So what I'm going to need at this point is for you, if you have any evidence at White Point Garden of any of these things that show that it is haunted, I would love to see it. So make sure you get in touch with me. That's through nicholasmcgurr.com. There's a Tell Me a Ghost Story tab right at the top. Shoot me an email. Let me know. Send me whatever evidence you have that may have come from White Point Garden with some kind of validation. Because at this point, I'm going to have to revisit at a different time of day to see if I can actually capture anything else. It could be just a great ghost story. Kind of like how Blackbeard's treasure is buried beneath the street between the Pirate House and the Dock Street Theater. To me, it's just a legend and a ghost story to tell. And that's kind of how I'm taking White Point Garden. So I'm not discrediting White Point Garden. I know I've said that I'm not using that location for, my treasure hunt for Byron Price's book, The Secret. But I'm also claiming that at this point, I have no evidence to show that White Point Garden is haunted in any way. Let's really stop and think about how this story is going. And it's being told through ghost tours, and it's kind of telling you a little bit about our history with one specific gentleman pirate named Stede Bonnet. You throw in Blackbeard, which is the legendary pirate, and it's a great, almost like a clickbait type story to get you closer to Charleston's history, which is very rich. I wouldn't be a tour guide downtown if it wasn't very rich. But with this, I feel like it's just a story as far as the haunting goes, to tell you more about Charleston history. Guys, that's all I have for this week on White Point Garden. If you do have evidence, of course, I want to hear it. I want to see it. So make sure that you send it over my way. Just go to nicholasmcgurr.com and hit the Tell Me a Ghost Story tab and give me your evidence. Give me something to go on here. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back at a later date and maybe even update this podcast. Again, I've been talking about, doing updates on anything that I find that might prove me wrong on previous episodes, and the same is going to go for this episode. So guys, in closing, just know that merch is underway for Stories in a Cemetery. So if you're looking to wear some really cool bright green Stories in a Cemetery on t-shirts and hats and stuff, we are looking to making those final decisions in the upcoming weeks. Things have been very busy. Don't forget to rate us here at Stories in a Cemetery on your favorite podcatcher. So that is a huge deal. That helps other people find the show. And then check out the bonus episode that we have on Byron Price's The Secret in Charleston on buymeacoffee.com/Nicholas McGurr. So, of course, I'll put the link in the show notes for that. And guys, that's all I have for this week, and I'll see you guys next week with another story in the cemetery. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in the Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in the Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.